Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And good morning, Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy, and welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. And we started talking on Monday about the purpose of life. And that fourth and most important element of believing in Allah, which is believing in His right to be worshipped and deified alone. And we talked about that being the purpose of our existence, of our human existence. And we talked about the ayah from Surah Al-Dhariyat, the 51st chapter of the Quran, the 56th ayah of that chapter, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinkind and mankind except to worship me. And we talked about the purpose. We talked a little bit about the purpose-driven life and what that means in general. And we said we wanted to be more specific in the coming days. But it makes sense now to pause briefly and talk about what we mean in Islam by worship. Now, people in other religions, typically when you say the word worship, immediately what will occur to their minds is rituals like prayer, fasting, almsgiving, bowing, kneeling, prostrating. These are the things that will occur to the mind of people in other religions. But in Islam, the word worship is far more comprehensive and all-encompassing. In fact, the scholars of Islam have defined worship in the Quran. They've defined worship in Islam as ismun jami'un li kulli ma yuhibbuhu Allahu wa yardah min al-aqwali wal a'mali al-zahira wal batina. They have defined worship as a comprehensive term, which encompasses everything, underscore the word everything, that Allah loves and is pleased with, whether statements or actions, whether those statements or actions be hidden or apparent. And so, although certainly worship in Islam encompasses prayer, it encompasses fasting, it encompasses almsgiving, it encompasses pilgrimage, it encompasses what we call rituals. It also encompasses things that are not on the radar of most people when they think of the word worship. It encompasses things like personal hygiene. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, as-siwak matharatun lil-fam, as-siwak matharatun lil-fam, mardatun lil-rabb. He said, brushing your teeth, toothbrushing, is something which it is cleansing to the mouth and pleasing to your Lord. It is something that when you do it with the right intention, you earn Allah's pleasure. Also providing for our wards, providing for those who are under our charge, our care, and our authority, those who we're responsible for. That's also something that pleases Allah and for which we'll be rewarded, something that we would do anyway. But when we do it with the right intention, we actually are worshiping Allah and earning rewards from Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. He says, men are the protectors and maintainers of women. They've been commissioned with this. And if they do that, if they do their job, they'll be rewarded for that. He also says, كُلُّكُمْ رَاءٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. All of you are shepherds. And each one of you is going to be asked, held responsible for his flock. And he said, الرَّجُلُ ra'in. A man is responsible. He is financially responsible for what? For his wards, for his wife, and for his children. He's going to be rewarded if he fulfills that responsibility. And he said in the one hadith, he said, even the luqma, even the bite, the morsel of food that you put in your wife's mouth is a sadaqah. It is something that you'll be rewarded for if you do it with the right intention. Also, brothers and sisters, observing dietary restrictions. Eating certain things, believing that they're permissible. Avoiding eating certain things because you believe they're impermissible is something for which we'll be rewarded. It is an act of worship. When we make certain choices in terms of diet, we're actually going to be rewarded. The Prophet said in the hadith, he said, مَا مَلَأَ آدَمِيٌّ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطَنٍ. A human being has never filled a vessel whose filling is worse than his stomach. فَإِنْ كَانَ وَلَا بُدْ. And if there is, he has no alternative, no choice except to stuff himself. then let him do it in this way. He said, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِ. He said, let him fill his stomach, let him eat in this way, let him follow this method of eating. And if he does that, he'll be rewarded. Let him put a third or fill a third of his stomach with food, a third with drink, and leave a third empty for easy breathing. And when the boy came into the majlis, while the Prophet and his companions were sitting and eating, and he immediately tried to what? Put his hand, his left hand, by the way, in the middle of the food that they were eating from. The Prophet caught hold of his hand and said, Ya ghulam, sammillah, wa kul bi yaminik, wa kul mimma yalik. He said, young man, he said, say Bismillah before you eat. And when you eat, eat with your right hand and eat from that which is closest to you. Meaning, if you follow this method of eating, you'll be rewarded for that. Also, the way we choose our friends. The friends we choose is an act of worship in Islam. So, for example, the Prophet said in the hadith, he said, Al-mar'u ala dini khalili falyandur ahadukum man yukhalil. He said, a person will follow the faith of his closest companion. So let each and every one of you choose his friends wisely. When we choose our friends wisely, choose our friends based upon faith, we'll be rewarded for that. In fact, the hadith in the athar that is attributed to Ibn Abbas, he said, Al-hubbu fillah wal-bughdu fillah wa innama tunalu wilayatullahi bidhalik. وَلَنْ يَجِدَ عَبْدٌ طَعْمَ الْإِيمَانِ وَإِنْ كَثُرَ صَلَاتُهُ وَصَوْمُهُ حَتَّى يَكُونَ كَذَلِكَ. Listen to this statement of Ibn Abbas. He said, loving for the sake of Allah and hating for the sake of Allah, this is the only way a person can attain Allah's friendship. And he said, a person will never taste the sweetness of faith, even if he prays a lot and fasts a lot, until he is like that, until he chooses his friends based upon the deen. And if he does that, he'll be rewarded. Not just rewarded with a general reward, but rewarded with Allah's friendship. Also, honoring our parents is an act of worship. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And your Lord has prescribed, He's mandated, He's made it a requirement that you worship none except Him and that you honor and obey your parents. And if you do that, you'll be rewarded. Being kind to our neighbors is an act of worship. Being kind to animals is an act of worship in Islam. We have the famous hadith where a prostitute, brothers and sisters, was walking along the path. She was thirsty. She went down into the well, got some water, and when she came out, she saw a dog panting from thirst. And she gave that dog water. فَشَكَرَ اللَّهُ لَهَا وَغَفْرَ لَهَا. The Prophet said in that hadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciated what she did and forgave her sins. Even this in our religion, brothers and sisters, is something for which we'll be rewarded, something which is considered an act of worship. And so worship is very comprehensive in our religion, and that leads us to a very important point and an answer to a question that's going to arise. When we read the ayah where Allah says, we have not created jinnkind and mankind except to worship me, people say, oh, so we're supposed to spend all our living days, all our waking moments, praying and fasting and bowing and kneeling and prostrating. When are we going to have time to live and feed ourselves and provide for ourselves? The answer, we can see it already when we look and understand from the Islamic point of view the comprehensiveness of the meaning of worship, the term worship. That Allah doesn't expect us to spend all day praying and fasting, but rather He wants us to lead, as we talked about earlier, a purpose-driven life, a life where He is at the center, pleasing Him is at the center, and there are many ways we can do that, that don't involve praying, fasting, almsgiving, bowing, kneeling, etc. More on this, brothers and sisters, in the coming days. But until then, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as always to bless your houses, to bless your spouses, to bless your families and your children, to bless your source of livelihood and income. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and make you blessed wherever you may be. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower you with His blessings, to surround you with His protection. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbal Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak. An Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.